G'day, welcome to Reflect on Lockdown Lessons Learned with Good Guidance. Good Guidance, as many of you will know, is Aprill Allen, also known as Knowledge Bird, Knowledge Management Specialist and Certified KCS and Intelligence Swarming Trainer. We've got me, James Gander, a Specialist in Service Management, IT Operations Management and a Certified Facilitator for the Phoenix Project, DevOps and Mars Lander ITSM simulations. We have Karen Ferris, who's a globally recognized leader in building organizational resilience, change enablement and adaptive leadership. And we have Rob Bull, who's a specialist in lean management and a certified Lego Serious Play facilitator. We've also got some wonderful attendees here joining us today, and we hope that you guys will have some insightful and challenging questions or discussion points for us all. The agenda for today is for each of the Good Guidance team to spend 5 to 10 minutes sharing one key lesson learned each from the last few months, as we as a community have been at varying levels of lockdown due to COVID-19. We'll then open the floor up to you, where we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so, depending on how many questions there are, discussing your challenges. Feel free to add questions to the Q&A section here as things pop into your head, and we'll talk through those at the end. So, as you know, Good Guidance offers you our knowledge and expertise. We help with strategy development, planning and prioritization of improvements, achievement of operational excellence, technology solutions and continual improvement, and with knowledge management at the core and organizational change management as a foundation for success, you can reset and refocus with Good Guidance. So we'll start off by letting Karen talk to us about some of the lessons learned within the organizational change management area. Karen, over to you.
Thanks, James. My challenge is staying within 10 minutes, or fabulous 10 minutes. I think for me, there's one big lesson learned out of this pandemic. And I'll take a step back. For a lot of organizations, the traditional approach they've taken to organizational change, that's transitioning people through change, is putting in place a change strategy, transition plan, a comms plan, stakeholder engagement plan, stakeholder impact analysis, sponsorship roadmap, training plan, you name it. And then they go, right, here's the stack, ready to go. And as we know, the project's left the building. So organizational changes had to fundamentally change. But we still talk about resistance to change. And we have just undergone the biggest change most of us and most organizations have ever been through. And we had to change fast, and we just did it. All of a sudden, all our digital transformation strategies and initiatives happened overnight, being planned for 4 years, happened overnight. People ended up working from home, and generally it was a successful transition. And there was no plans. Nobody wrote anything down. Nobody said who's going to sponsor this change. We just did it. And I think one of the biggest reasons we just did it and made it happen is that everybody understood why. There was no question. We didn't just say to people, we're going to send you to work from home and we'll give you some technology. And that's generally what organizations do with their people. They say, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So that's like saying, as said, you're going to work from home and we're going to use Zoom. It's like, but why? So as soon as you said why, and in this case, our why was just a given, wasn't it? You either go home or the chances are you're going to contract COVID-19 and you're going to be ill and your family could be ill. And there was just a burning platform for people to do it. And I think that's the biggest lesson for me, is that organizations and people who are driving and leading change start with why and get people on board. It's the most important thing to address. If I understand why we're changing, and it could be the organization needs to respond to competition, well, that addresses not only why the organization needs to do it, but also addresses what's in it for me. My job, is it going to be secure if my organization can be ahead of the competition or respond to increasing consumer demand or customer demand or whatever it's going to be. So that's the biggest thing for leaders of change. get rid of all this documentation. If anything, it's a plan on a page. It needs to be able to change at the drop of a hat, and we need to make sure that everybody absolutely understands why.
Cool. I was expecting you to keep going for another 10 minutes there.
Oh, was I?
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Karen. Thank you very much. Rob, do you want to follow on with that?
Yeah, and it's really nice following on with that why, because the teams and the lessons I saw and reflecting on the first lockdown we had in New Zealand was those successful teams took the initial time to plan. They didn't just rush home. They didn't just rush into things. And even coming out of COVID-19, they didn't just rush back into the office or the workplace, or for me with lean and manufacturing into the workshop and just slam into work. They took the time to understand the why, but also took the time to plan what does good look like for, might have been for the day or the week. So, and I guess the take of that was that there was no micromanagement. So teams were empowered just to change the process, make it work. So they really were empowered to change processes. And I guess going back onto what Karen said, you know, those 4-year planning, oh, we nearly got it right. You had to change it overnight. The other thing too with that, and hopefully Karen will agree, is leadership up the communication. The successful teams up the communication. And they were open to learning, but open also going back to the empowerment of breaking those rules and, you know, hey, we have to rethink, let's just change, see, but set the environment. So if it didn't work, let's problem solve that through. So it was really just, I guess, that leveling of the playing field across the whole team. So that was really one of the major insights that I saw with successful teams going into a lockdown, but also coming out, because I think they had to do that at start of lockdown, but also taking that change and adapting that back into when they could go back to work. So it was really taking a lean lens as really you know, those teams are asking us, you know, what steps are really necessary? You know, that waste stuff, you know, why do we do that? You know, 58 steps in that process. We can do this in 12. Let's do it. And that then rolled over to, why am I handing that piece of work over? If I train myself up to this, I can do the whole process. So it really enabled that whole process review and change, and looking at upskilling people, looking at, you know, are those handovers of information or process necessary? So I think it was just those really the positive stories that, you know, really came with teams that were open to that, set those daily expectations. And I think going back to the why, Karen, is also, you know, reinforcing that each day. You know, one great thing around change and, you know, lean and change management, they're all similar methodologies, is you think you've sent the message once, but you've got to say it all the time. So it was that whole communication transparency. So that's what I really saw from successful organizations. And the last one probably is around the people. It was the organizations that enabled the balance of workload to wellness. Because yes, there were still things done, and if you could do things, great, do them. Let's do them differently with the process stuff that I already talked about. But take your time to be well. You know, this is the whole bottom of the Maslow scale. You know, get well, be secure, feel like you're, you know, safe, and then let's work through those issues. And that's what, you know, those daily Zoom meetings for lots of teams, you know, they were checking in rather than as much as setting those daily expectations. It was a check-in. Are you okay? If you're feeling freaked out, it's okay just to have 24 hours. So it's that whole maturity of, you don't have to work 8 hours and do work. You know, you've got your task, you'll set a deadline, we'll let you achieve it within that deadline. So it's around the transparency, around communication, and around empowerment, you know, setting the environment so they felt okay to break the rules, because we had to overnight, as Karen originally said. And then the last one was, the teams that celebrated success. They celebrated that they got through a day, a week, and just kept, going back to the wellness, kept everyone up. So those were the insights I really had around certainly lockdown, but also coming, we've had the, I guess the fortunate experience of coming out of it, and what does that look like and what is necessary. And I think a very similar processes between the two. Take time, be open to change, and do it as a team. So those are my insights for,
Cool. That's really good. Thank you very much, Rob. And that sort of feeds a little bit into what I was going to talk about as well. So I spoke to a few IT operations teams, both during and after lockdown, and there was a bit of a common thing being raised by those people as well. I know we've got some people here who aren't from the IT sphere of the world, so IT operations is the pointy end of IT. So it's the service desk, the infrastructure support teams, the ones looking after all the tin and wire that makes everything work. And those guys really felt it. One of the key things that kept coming out for them was a lack of clarity around expectations by the wider business. So we've talked about going into lockdown, but just for some clarification really, different countries did it in different ways at different times. But in New Zealand, as our government said, we went hard and we went early. So I'm just going to read some notes here because I made some notes earlier, but on Saturday, the 21st of March, the government announced that we got the new alert system, with level 1 being almost normal and level 4 being complete lockdown. Excuse me. On the Monday, the 23rd, we were told we were moving to level 3, so that was restricted movements. And then at midnight on the 25th, so Wednesday, we went into full level 4 lockdown. So only essential services were allowed to operate in level 4, so supermarkets, dairies, filling stations, GPs. But everybody else had to work from home. So IT departments had 3 working days notice really to make sure that everybody in their organisation could work from home. And that was a real challenge, because what a lot of the IT teams I spoke to found was that nobody in the wider organisation had shared their business continuity plans with IT. So suddenly there were expectations that they'd be able to do this, that, or the other, and IT wasn't ready for it. So spreadsheets sitting on people's desktop computers in the office, how's IT going to enable us to do that? We use this software as a service site, and then they discover that it's limited by IP address, so they couldn't access it from home. IT had to work out how to roll out Office 365 and get all the relevant licenses for those who maybe didn't need it when it was all in the office. Getting additional screens and hardware for people to be able to work from home, because a lot of back office teams just use desktops. Suddenly they need laptops and extra screens. So you've got service desk people who were having to support people, not just from a technical perspective, but on occasion psychologically as well. They were having to talk to people in a different way, because you couldn't just assume that everybody was just coming in, doing their job and then going home. They were handling other issues as well. They were being asked to use technology that a lot of them had never used before, like Microsoft Teams for doing video conferencing. But on top of that, the IT service desk staff had to migrate themselves from the office to home. They had to make sure that all their technology worked so that they could take the phone calls from the users. They had to make sure that everybody understood what the rosters were they were working to, because it's one thing having a roster that says, I'll take my break at 10:30, and if it's quiet, I'll go a little bit earlier, or if it's busy, I'll go a little bit later, because everybody can see. But if nobody can see me, does everybody know that I'm still there or not? Procurement had to think on their feet and pull in favours, maybe get imaginative and circumvent some policies just so they could get the hardware that was needed where it was needed. Infrastructure teams had to make sure everything was working properly. So, excuse me, the biggest lesson that everybody's told me about was that collaboration and communication. If the wider organisation isn't communicating their business continuity plans with IT, can they expect IT to deliver what's required? If IT can, is it going to be within the cost boundaries of what the organisation is willing to spend? Could IT offer something different that's maybe cheaper or more effective than what they think about? And IT and the wider organisation need to collaborate and work on these things so they're delivering the value that's required. And if that communication doesn't take place, then the collaboration can't take place, and then the business is put at risk. So that lesson learned really comes back to make sure that you understand, if you're in IT, what the wider organisation expects to be able to do. What are their critical services? What do they need to be able to use to do their job? And if you're not in the non-IT part of your organisation, go and talk to them. Tell them what you're expecting and share it with them. If you've tried things and tested it, tell them what worked and what didn't, because you're all part of one organisation trying to deliver value to your end customer. So really, that was the key lesson that everybody told me about: communicate and collaborate. And it comes back to the why. It comes back to everything that Rob was saying as well, just from a different perspective. So that was from my point of view, and we'll let Aprill round things up now and tell us from her perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Well, while Rob was speaking, I had the phrase come to mind that you've got to slow down to speed up. You know, take that bit of time after the initial chaos has sunk in to look at what's in front of us and what are we dealing with and how do we go from here. And what this chaos has given us is the accelerated adoption of collaboration, because we're all working remotely. This is the sort of outcome that people like me dream of, because we're trying to get everybody to come into a collaborative space consistently and get on with their work in that way. And so working remotely has sort of forced that to happen in a way, because most people have been sort of given their Microsoft Teams platform to go ahead and do their meetings on, whether they're through the video over Teams or whether they're using the chat. If they're not on Teams, they're probably using Slack. So one of those two platforms, Teams have now sort of broadly adopted in a overnight sort of manner, which, you know, we really just dream of that kind of level of adoption. So I've seen this as a terrific opportunity to leverage that behaviour change that we've been forced into. And the people who I've seen succeed with this are those who come to their Microsoft Teams or their Slack platform and apply some purpose and practice around that. So that's about the slowing down to speed up and go, okay, well, we've got Teams here now, and we are coming together as a group, but how can we come together in this platform in a way that is making our work more effective for our customers and easier for us to do when we are switching between our home and work life in the same room that we're sitting in. So when you're thinking about purpose, that's going back to the why. So, you know, what do we come to our chat platforms to do? So often it's coming into this space, well, coming from an IT ops perspective, James and I both serve those customers, those types of use cases quite a bit, is we're coming to Teams to escalate. But that's not the only opportunity we have for using collaborative platforms. We could be coming in there in the morning to start our day, coming together and looking at what do we need to achieve today just to feel like we're getting through our workload. When we can close off an escalation. So don't just lob an escalation into a channel and then go back to whatever's sitting in the inbox. Be present for the process of solving that problem and answering that question, because then you can take the insights that have come out from that and go back to the knowledge base, create that knowledge article, close that loop. So wrap some practice around the collaboration so that you make something more out of the exchange you've just had. And so the people that are doing that and bringing some mindfulness to the way they collaborate are really succeeding in this environment, even though it can feel more high pressure than it does in the office when you're surrounded by your team. So that's what I would recommend as we come out of, I mean, Karen and I are back in a lockdown. Actually, James is too. We're back in another lockdown. So we're looking forward to being in a similar position as Rob is now. But as we come out of it, keep our collaborative practices and how can we make them even better? Because when you do that, you can really come out of the gate so much more advanced than how we went in.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. Thank you, April. And it's good to see that even though we're all coming at this from different areas, we've sort of got some common threads going through that. So it's really good. And we've had some great questions and comments already. So I think we'll end the recording now and we'll open the floor up to the attendees. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.